points. President Trump's budget plan is on the table, and it includes a 10% hike in military spending, along with cuts across the board.
We're going to do more with less.
The DNC has its new leader. He's already attacking the Trump administration on immigration and social justice.
We must speak truth to power.
And 11 Syracuse professors are suggesting a carbon tax to combat climate change. We sat down with one of them this week.
All that and more ahead.
Good evening, Syracuse. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. We begin tonight by taking a look at the latest controversy surrounding Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
The Washington Post reported late last night that Attorney General Jeff Sessions met with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. twice during the campaign season.
Sessions, a Trump surrogate throughout the campaign, did not disclose the meeting during his nomination hearing.
Many Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, have said that Sessions lied under oath and should resign immediately.
Amid pressure from both sides of the aisle, Sessions announced earlier today that he would recuse himself in a potential investigation into Russian ties to the election and the Trump campaign.
Let's take a look at where the story begins. Here's Senator Al Franken questioning Jeff Sessions during his nomination hearing.
If there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
So we just heard Jeff Sessions there saying that he did not talk with the Russians. Now you can kind of look at it from, the wording of Senator Franken's question, but you have Democrats saying that is perjury. That's lying under oath. This needs investigation.
You also have him on record saying yesterday that he had no recollection of these meetings, and today he's saying that these meetings had nothing to do with the actual campaign. So clearly there's a disconnect there. So it's a stark difference in terms of what he's saying versus what's being reported. And we had Republicans asking for the recusal of Jeff Sessions. Obviously they have that now. But Democrats are going to want them to go further. They're going to want an investigation into Sessions himself. Right, absolutely. And I think that that's going to present an inherent problem not only for him going forward, but also for the process going forward.
Absolutely.
When we come back, we'll be taking a look at President Trump's budget proposal.
Don't go anywhere.
They told me a bottle couldn't dream. That I would never become a superhero. But I learned how to fly. Just to come back in a new disguise. And be the hero that I've always wanted to be.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
President Trump's budget proposal for next year includes $1 trillion for infrastructure and an extra $54 billion for the military. Talking Point's political correspondent Dan Prager is here to tell us where the money is expected to come from. Dan, thanks for having us. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So $54 billion to the military, $1 trillion to infrastructure. He has to make cuts somewhere. Where can we expect these cuts?
Well, he's announced his plans for the military at least, and he said it's coming, a lot of it is going to come from the EPA, from State Department and foreign aid cuts, and really just a slew of domestic programs that he hasn't really been put many specifics into, but a lot of cuts are going to come from there.
So what about the infrastructure ban, $1 trillion and the wall? How do those factor in?
Well, like you said, the wall is another big thing that he's hoping to pay for. And right now, the Department of Homeland Security only has about $20 million reserved for the wall.
And that's going to cost, say that's at least $10 billion to build the wall.
$10 billion really like a light estimate, I guess.
Ball.
And the infrastructure plan doesn't really have a cost at this point. We don't know where that money's going to come from. He hasn't laid it out yet, but it's an expensive plan. And the money's going to have to come from somewhere.
And the new information about cuts from the EPA or to the EPA came out today, saying that they're expected to cut 25% of the budget, over 30% of the staff. Now, what impact is that going to have, and what programs is he specifically going after?
Well, he's going to gut the EPA if he has his way. Right now, the cuts are 25% to just programs and 30% to staff. And now that's about $2 billion. He's also cutting 38 distinct programs, including industrial waste, toxic waste, air and water plans. But a lot of the money taken away is from state grants, which is going to really hurt a lot of state environmental projects. So he's following through on his promise to gut the EPA and really take out a lot of money from it.
And if those cuts go through, the EPA is going to be at their lowest number since the 80s and 90s in terms of funding and employment. But looking ahead, so a lot of this money he wants to put towards the military while making cuts here domestically. How does that play into his America First slogan or catchphrase, if you will?
Well, he is following through on all of his promises. He promised to strengthen the military. He promised to bring money in for infrastructure and create jobs and build the wall. So he's following through on all of his promises. It remains to be seen whether or not it will actually get confirmed. The budget is not his alone to confirm. So maybe the Northern Democrats might get mad if that infrastructure plan isn't put in, but he's doing what his constituents voted him in for.
Now, on that, the fact that he does not control the budget, and Senator Lindsey Graham is on record saying that this budget is asking for too much and it is, quote, dead upon arrival. Now, what can we expect in terms of him having to actually work with Congress on that issue?
There is a very little chance that this budget, as he put it out, will go through. Most presidents, when they come into office, put out a really bold proposal knowing that it will get negotiated down. He's got entire opposition from the Democrats. Not a single Democrat will vote for this. A lot of Republicans have spoken out against this bill too. So it's going to get shaved down a lot. Whether or not it gets scrapped entirely or not is something that remains to be seen. But he's got opposition from all sides on this budget. But I think he knew he was going to have that.
Thank you, Dan.
New York and 30 other states expanded Medicaid coverage with the help of federal funding under the Affordable Care Act. Now, a Republican-backed plan seems to change Medicaid to a block grant system, which would severely cut federal funding for the health insurance program. New York Senator Chuck Schumer believes President Trump has broken his promise to constituents. Take a look.
He broke his promise to working Americans when, after vowing not to cut Social Security, Medicare or Medicaid, during the campaign, he proposes to cut Medicaid.
Here with more is Talking Points contributor Connor White. Connor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what exactly will a block grant system mean for New Yorkers?
What it could mean for the state of New York is it could lose billions of dollars over the years as effects compound. The Republican-backed plan, they're basically, now that they're in control, looking to mold healthcare in their own image, and what that includes is reeling back on programs like Medicaid. As you mentioned, New York chose to expand its Medicaid federal funds, grants from the federal government, and now that the block grant system could come into play, it puts a cap on that money, and it'll be up to New York to try to make up all of that cash.
And how do those changes affect Medicaid recipients?
It could essentially mean loss of coverage for recipients. There's 5 million recipients in the state. There's just under 100,000 in Onondaga and Syracuse, and these are fiscally poor areas. It's not an economically strong location, and those that can't pick up the tab on their own could see their insurance go away.
So like you said, this has the potential to hurt thousands of people across New York State. How exactly will this shape the political landscape moving forward?
Well, looking at 2018, that's the big thing. It's whether or not Republicans will be able to hold on to districts that they won this past election cycle if the block grant system has these dire effects. If you look at the map, however, Medicaid did have a big part to play with regard to the election cycle. The majority of counties with 100,000 recipients or over went blue. They voted for Clinton. So it's on voters' minds, and whether or not it could hurt Republicans, we'll have to wait and see.
Now, in looking at those political repercussions and the destruction of this, why would the Republicans want to do this, considering what they could pay for in the end?
Well, it's all about making healthcare in their own image. There have been several discussions about, obviously repealing Obamacare, and because they aren't able to jump right on that right away, they're looking at trying to de-strengthen one of the staples of Obamacare, which was the expansion of Medicare, Medicaid, and programs like it.
Connor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
After the break, a preview of the new DNC chairman.
And a closer look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Talking Points will be right back.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it.
Since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
The contested race for the DNC chair ended Saturday with the election of Obama administration Labor Secretary Tom Perez, who defeated Minnesota Representative Keith Ellison. Here to talk about the future of the Democratic Party under Tom Perez's leadership is Talking Points contributor Sabrina Majori. Sabrina, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So are Democrats risking alienating the progressive wing of the party by electing Tom Perez?
I think this is certainly a possibility. Right now, progressives are not happy with the Democratic Party and not happy with their choice of candidate. The entire race could sort of be seen as a proxy battle between Sanders and Clinton camps. You had the people closely aligned with Clinton and Obama who ultimately backed Tom Perez, and those such as Bernie Sanders and Mayor de Blasio who backed Ellison. And the entire race was really underscored by a series of underground phone calls in which both sides supported their prospective candidates.
And what is Perez going to do to actually unite the Democratic Party?
So he's actually taken immediate action to sort of unite the party, bring the party together. He came out with a statement in which he said that good leaders are, quote, great listeners, and you will always have my ear, and I will always have your back. And he also quickly moved to appoint Ellison deputy chair of the DNC, and that was a strategic move to sort of bring followers into the fold.
In the last couple of days since Perez has been elected and been making media appearances, how have Ellison and the progressives reacted to that?
So Ellison has done a lot to sort of get his supporters to back Perez. In a joint news conference, Ellison said, quote, I trust Tom Perez, and if you trust me, then you've got to come on board with Tom Perez. Sanders also is conveying support despite the differences he had in the beginning, but he did make a statement in which he sort of said that Tom Perez has to do more to get the working class and young people involved with the Democratic Party.
Now, not long after this election, Donald Trump took to Twitter and said that congratulations to Thomas Perez, who has just been named chairman of the DNC. I cannot be happier for him or the Republican Party. Take a listen to Perez's response.
You know, our unity as a party is our greatest strength, and it's his worst nightmare. And frankly, what we need to be looking at is whether this election was rigged by Donald Trump and his buddy Vladimir Putin.
Now, what do you make of this exchange?
So as chair of the Democratic Party, Perez is going to be responsible for sort of mobilizing the opposition against Trump. And in his victory speech, he vowed that the Democrats would wage an all-out war to basically prevent Trump from gaining a second term. He also promised to be Trump's worst nightmare, as you heard in that voiceover. And in a Twitter statement, he said, "Call me Tom and don't get too happy. At Keith Ellison and I, and Democrats united across the country will be your worst nightmare." So right now, he's very hostile towards Trump, and it's going to be interesting to see what he does to sort of mobilize support in the future.
Well, Sabrina, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is as old as both nations themselves. When the State of Israel was first created, the idea of a Palestinian state came to be. That came to be known as the two-state solution, a state for Israel and one for Palestine, which President Trump says he won't insist on. But if not the two-state solution, then what? Here to discuss this further is Talking Point's international correspondent, Elijah Shama. Elijah, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's say for a minute the two-state solution is off the table. What are the other options?
It's interesting because when we look at the other options from a two-state solution, there's full autonomy for the Palestinian territories in the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem. We have the one-state solution in which Israel and Palestine kind of become a single nation. And then we have a three-state partition, which would have outside Arab nations kind of help control parts of the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem.
So what would the one-state solution mean for the Jewish state?
It's interesting because when we look at the one-state solution for the Jewish state, one of the reasons why a lot of Israelis are hesitant to go in this direction is because the Palestinian birth rate is so much higher than the Israeli birth rate. And when you look at a government like Israel's, which is proportional, it means that over a given period of time, Israelis would effectively be kicked out of their own country in a certain degree. Palestinians would control the majority of the seats and the majority of things, which would make it no longer a Jewish state by majority.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the Palestinian Authority having some authority over the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem, what is actually the current situation and what is explicitly the reason for much of the problems?
It's interesting because when you look at the Palestinian Authority, they do have that autonomy. They are able to kind of control the things within the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem, but they have no public diplomacy. Their security is entirely provided by the Israeli military, and the majority of Palestinians aren't happy with them. 77% of Palestinians feel like the Palestinian Authority does not represent their beliefs. So it's really hard to kind of push for full autonomy when what's there right now is really not being seen as effective by the people it's governing.
So how do the neighboring Arab countries in the past and in the present, how have they sort of factored into these possible solutions?
It's interesting because when we go back to the Oslo Accords, when we go back to 1948 and the original partition, we see Arab nations taking a much more involved stance. Now, after Gamal Nasser, after Yasser Arafat, after all these kind of big Arab leaders have kind of fallen by the wayside, no one's really wants to take up that cause. And it's interesting because Palestinian nationalism has killed the three-state solution. The fact that Palestinians want to control their own state means that they don't want Egyptians, they don't want Syrians, they don't want Jordanians taking control over this territory. They want to be in charge of their own territory, and that really hampered and basically killed that solution before it got off the ground.
Interesting. Thank you, Elijah. Coming up, I'll tell you more about a conversation I had with the SU professor about fighting climate change.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he would flap his arms again and again.
One day, I found out I have something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Recently, scientists and academics from SU and ESF submitted a commentary to Syracuse.com where they voiced their support for a carbon tax in the fight against climate change. I got a chance to sit down with Professor David Dreisen from the SU College of Law to discuss the piece. Take a listen. We're here with Professor Dreisen, who wrote with 11 SU professors a commentary on the carbon tax and carbon emissions and how to mitigate those. Mr. Dreisen, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Now, what led you and 11 SU professors to write this article?
Well, we're very concerned about global climate disruption. It's absolutely clear that the Earth's temperature is warming and that it's because of greenhouse gases. The science is clear on that. And the effects are going to be devastating and are starting to be devastating. We're seeing sea levels rise, we're seeing flooding, we're seeing wildfires, we're seeing droughts, we're seeing the spread of infectious diseases. A huge number of negative consequences are coming to pass right now because of this. So we need to do something about it. Now, unfortunately, the current administration is busy dismantling the standard-setting capacity of the government, the traditional way of addressing environmental ills, to try to disable EPA from standard setting. And if that is not stopped in the courts or somewhere else, we're going to have an alternative way forward. And a lot of us feel that a carbon tax would be a good way to approach climate disruption. It could provide an incentive to switch to cleaner fuels, to use more energy efficiency, to do the things that we need to do to gradually get
And in terms of the current political climate, do you think a carbon tax is viable given the dismantling that you previously stated?
In the very short term, I'd say no. But I think a big reason that we all signed on to this is that we think this has prospects when sanity returns to the government, which we think hope will happen. And we can't ignore this problem forever. And in fact, I think if there may be a need for revenue, and so our view is this has a lot of support from Democrats and the Republicans who the few who haven't abandoned the goal of having environmental protection and being serious about serious problems. They like a carbon tax. A lot of Republican economists like carbon taxes.
What has been the biggest stopgap or the biggest barrier in it not being able to get to the table in the past, either in the Obama administration or now in the Trump administration?
No, I think the biggest problem is, for some reason, in the last few years, the Republican Party, which has traditionally been a partner in addressing environmental issues, has gone all in on protecting corporations from any kind of cost associated with solving an environmental problem. And that has to change. And it requires, people who are listening to this and everybody to demand that. It's not going to happen on its own, but it's not inevitable that things continue in this bad direction. We need people to stand up and talk to their representatives and demand what needs to be done.
Despite our best efforts, we can't cover everything that happened this week in just 30 minutes.
However, we here at Talking Points think it's important to pay attention to stories that aren't getting as much coverage, so here are some that fell through the cracks.
The father of the first American to die in combat under the Trump administration is refusing a meeting with the president and calling for an investigation into his son's death. Chief Special Warfare Operator William Ryan Owens was killed in a Navy SEAL raid on al-Qaeda in Yemen on January 29th.
The White House has called the mission a success. However, while 14 militants were killed, the raid also took the lives of more than 20 civilians, and a key target escaped.
Russian protesters filled the streets of Moscow last Sunday to mark the anniversary of the death of Boris Nemtsov, who was gunned down in the same city 2 years ago. Nemtsov was a member of Russia's opposition party and a vocal critic of Vladimir Putin.
Putin condemned the killing and offered condolences to the family. However, many of Putin's opponents still question the Kremlin's potential role in the murder, as Nemtsov is not the first Putin critic to die under suspicious circumstances.
Senior members of Congress and the intelligence community assisted the White House in an effort to debunk a New York Times story about the Trump campaign's alleged ties to Russia.
Sean Spicer connected the director of the CIA and the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee with reporters from the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. Direct contact between the director of the CIA and a reporter is unprecedented.
When we come back, Josh and I will take a look ahead at the week in politics.
Stay with us.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Tonight, Josh and I are taking a look ahead.
In Tuesday night's joint address to Congress, President Trump advocated for bipartisan support on several key issues.
With Democrats and Republicans deeply divided, we'll weigh the likelihood of some of those reforms.
One issue that I'll be looking ahead to is the battle over a comprehensive infrastructure bill. President Trump has been steadfast since the campaign trail in updating and reinvesting in the country's critical infrastructure. There is bipartisan support for upgrades to bridges, roads, and the like. However, the president's suggested ask will be a tough sell. Trump labeled the issue as a national rebuilding that he is asking $1 trillion for from Congress. Trump rationalized his ask by claiming how the $6 trillion invested in the Middle East over the time by the federal government could have been used to have rebuilt our own country. As cut and dry as the president might make the issue seem, Republicans are not sold on the metrics of the investment. If the GOP hopes to complete some of their major goals, fitting $1 trillion into the budget is going to be quite the predicament for Congress moving forward.
President Trump also suggested a bipartisan approach to solving America's immigration problems. The president's focus was on supporting high-skilled immigration while still taking a hard stance on criminals. President Trump also suggested that many illegal immigrants could achieve a legal status to remain in the United States without earning citizenship. While the push sounds promising, many on the left and some on the right are weary of the prospect. Some Democrats say that Mr. Trump must walk back his executive orders on immigration before they take him seriously. Others on the right suggest that the border must be secured before reform can move forward. Let's take a listen to what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say.
And he mentioned maybe he'll change his views on immigration. And the media got into a buzz about that. Then the speech he gave was one of the most virulently anti-immigrant speeches that we have heard any president ever give.
Since the Gang of Eight, which included Senator Schumer, failed to pass bipartisan immigration reform in 2013, the subject has been controversial and short-lived ever since. With the right and left noting different concerns, reform is certainly a tough ask from President Trump. As they say, the devil is in the details. That's all the time we have tonight.
Be sure to follow Citrus TV News on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
For Talking Points, I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney.